The WK-508 is the IEP review form. There are lots of IEP review forms out there floating around. So we just took an IEP review form and tried to trim it down to the basics, and also go with our most commonly used questions and selections on the form to kind of compile it into one form that people could use across the board. So if you're interested in using a review form, this is not anything like the indicator reviews or the gifted file reviews. This is specific to your internal processes. So if you do mock IEP reviews, if you have an IEP reviewer who looks at the IEPs and gives feedback, if you want to collect data on common errors or areas that are areas of strength for your staff and use that for professional development, this is a way that that can be done. So the IEP review form is, it's got the provider's name at the top, the student's name, the kid's ID. The review date is what the reviewer will fill in for when they reviewed the IEP. And then if it's an amendment, it'll have that date. So here you can customize. Right now, as it stands, it has reviewer 1, 2, or 3. So it's anonymous, but if you had this, you could customize it with, Amber or Brian or whoever your reviewer is. Or you can simply use the 1, 2, and 3 and specify other below, and maybe you would pick Amber as the reviewer. So once you have that information, there's also a part to the right here that has required actions. So when we get finished with this IEP review, you're able to alert the provider when you send it to them, whether or not they didn't have any errors, so they don't have any action that they need to do or take or do an amendment. Maybe you just want them to look at some comments that you made. There were some suggestions maybe for next time, or you wanted to tell them that they did a good job on an area. You may have a clerical corrections process. That's what this checkbox is for. Perhaps they need to conduct an amendment, or maybe you're still missing some paperwork. So these are some very common actions that come out of a typical review at the office level. So those are included over here. And an area for general comments. So you can type your general comments here or instructions for the next steps of what you want that person to do with this record, if anything. When you don't fill it out or you leave it blank, it simply does not print. So this area would be blank. So some of the areas that it looks at on the IEP review form are some basic procedures and then basic content. So on this one, you can tell that it talks about the notice of meeting and the parental rights. So it asks questions such as, was each person or the student if they're 18 provided the notice of meeting and acknowledgement in their native language? Was that provided 10 days in advance, or did it get waived? Did it have the accurate date, time, and location? All of those file review questions that you want to catch in advance of a file review are some of the things that we use to build this core IEP form for you to use internally prior to your actual review. So these are simply yes, no. A couple of them have NA. For example, if outside agencies were invited, perhaps that student is not of transition age and it's not applicable. Or yes, they were invited because we had consent, or no, the outside agencies were invited, but we didn't have consent on file. However you want to mark that in your agency, because regardless of what you choose, you can always put your comments and instructions below. The mandatory members checklist section talks about the required people who have to be at the meeting and then whether or not excusals are on file. Miscellaneous procedures may be, and some of these you may choose to take the form and make a few edits of your own, but was the draft sent at least 3 days prior to the meeting? Was it held by the due date? Was it submitted in a timely manner? All these things on the services chart and PW1 all match. Everything was uploaded like it should have been. Some of these things are going to be agency specific, but we found that these were the most common ones. So instead of changing it, saying we don't do that, you could always just mark it NA or leave it blank. General comment section for anything that wasn't on there that's agency specific. And then we start getting a little bit into content. So this talks about the prior written notice or the PWN. This one is talking specifically about the request for consent, not the request for evaluation consent. So were they provided a PWN in their native language? Does everything match date-wise? Did they fill out their methods boxes? This is a great one because some people have said, well, now that you have the methods delivery at the bottom of the PWN, people are tending to forget it. Okay, so there's a way to keep track of that. So you can kind of go through each of these sections and see on the prior written notice what we take into account. And then again, anything extra can be added or further described in the text box. Transition. If you have a student who's 14 years or older, this will automatically show up. And it is those questions related to indicator 13. Okay, so you can go through those. It's yes, no, or NA. Comment section, transition services and graduation, additional transition information, and then we get into the IEP content. So based on the PLAF section, were there comments listed? Were they on the meeting notes? Were in the parent input section? Where did you find those parent comments? Somewhere on the IEP. Each thing's updated annually. It has a current description of their academic achievement and of their functional performance. So as you review these, you can kind of see most of these are based on indicators that are on the IDEA review. Goals and benchmarks, special education services, assessments, participation with non-disabled peers. And then we come down to forms. You know, did they upload their meeting notice? Was the PWN uploaded? Were their meeting notes completed? If these don't apply, you would mark NA. If they do apply, you could mark yes or no. And then, of course, anything, you may have an additional form that you keep track of, and you could write that information here. So there is a section for evaluations and reevaluations, and these are the assurance questions that were added after last year, I believe 2023. The assurance questions were added for evals and re-evals. And then final comments. So originally when we had created this form, it had a very handy auto calculation that you could put in. But what we found was that some errors had a little bit more weight to them than others, and there was no real way to provide a weighted score that would be consistently agreed upon by everybody using the form. So for example, if someone forgot to put, I don't know, let's go up to one of these things here. Let's say someone forgot to have a progress report consistently with the goal. That's of course a concern, but maybe you find out that an error on the PWN, like a failure to get something signed, was of a little more weight and value. So it had a scoring thing at the bottom where X amount of points to X amount of points was exemplary and good and fair and so on and so forth. So you may have had a significant error, but still got exemplary. So because of that, we have updated the form to just include a rubric of unsatisfactory, needs improvement, developing, meets expectations, and exceeds. So it's got a rubric here, and then you are able to manually enter that in. So if you wanted to, at the end of the year, for a provider, you could pull all the providers' review sheets and get an average of their score for that school year, which can be provided then to the administration to assist in the evaluation process. Final comments, is anything else you want to say about the IEP review or any further directions that you have? So this has been very helpful for many agencies who are using it now. If you're interested in using this form or you have any questions about how to use it or when you would use it, feel free to reach out. Get a hold of Amber or Brian, and you can email us at amber@webkids.org or brian@webkids.org. Thank you and have a great day.